Good morning.
Good morning.
So as you see, I've got the latest news up there. In case,
Zimmerman.
yeah,
He shot a black man.
yeah. In case you want to, because the verdict came in last night. Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Yeah. So I thought you might be interested in case you want to do this. It's actually the editorial I've got here is actually only 2 pages. It's pretty short. You can think about it. It's up to you because I know you want to read the other thing too. It's entirely up to you. I've got it there. I've got either one of them if you want to do it.
Okay.
Okay, just letting the weight of your head and your arms take you over and your knees unlocked down to the halfway position and leaning comfortably on your legs just above the knees. Feel your back arched over, filling up the back with air. 5 nice, deep, easy breaths. Let your head dangle there to be sure it's all loose. Through the spine. Bringing the head and chin up last. Good, you're staying right with me. The new position, the knees unlocked, good balance, and ready to go over straight to the other side. Just the weight of your head taking you down. Check that the arms are loose, just dangling there. Bend the knees just a little more, get a little deeper stretch. Position. And coming up slowly straight through the spine. I feel like a big yawn after that. Another new position, a good base. And just go straight over, letting the weight of your head and arms take you all the way to the floor. Nice and slow. Until the backs of your hands are flat against the floor. And now slowly come up straight through the spine. Bringing the head and chin up last. Shake out one arm from the shoulder. The wrist is loose, the fingers are shaking, and the other arm. Everything is shaking. Okay. You're familiar with that term, blind justice, right?
Blind justice. No. I guess I.
The saying
Blind
is,
justice.
the saying is, justice is blind. And the symbol is a little statue that you see the government uses.
I see.
Justice is holding a scale, balancing a
Yes.
scale, and wearing a blindfold.
Yes, I.
So the idea is, of course, that justice
Fair.
can't see whether you're black or white or brown.
Ah, it's fair, right? Should be fair.
Unbiased.
Unbiased. Okay.
It's from New England newspaper. It was at the top of the list of about 4 or 5 different editorials.
Oh.
And when I saw it was from Connecticut, it's from a Connecticut newspaper. It doesn't say that here, but I know I saw that on the original. It's from a Connecticut. You know where that is? That's just north of New York.
Okay.
because in a way that's appropriate. New England is considered sort of the traditional seat of, the government and laws and justice. And I thought their view would be probably, more controversial than some.
Okay.
But we'll see. I haven't read it. I just grabbed this quickly right before we started. Calls warming up on this first line. You can go right behind me. And George is a perfect number 3 size shape. So,
Sure.
yeah. So that should be an easy focal pocket to hit. George! Yeah, keep it nice and relaxed, right? Do that one again for me. Nice and relaxed, no effort. 4 words, and then you do the 4 after me. George Zimmerman started following. So on each one of them, I'm taking about 4 steps down to feel it go into a lower register. And I feel right away my voice is lowered. Let's do that paragraph with consonant energy leading. George Zimmerman started following a 17-year-old boy around his neighborhood on the night of February 26, 2012, ultimately got out of his car, confronted him, and then killed him with a concealed handgun he was carrying. Energy leading Zimmerman walked out. And of course, now I'm going to really do the linking. Walked out. Zimmerman walked out of a Florida courtroom, a free man on Saturday night, and will even get his gun and concealed weapon permit back. We'll continue now with consonant energy leading with good tonal support. Looking for places to link in phrase, you're looking for places to vary the tempo, rhythm, and looking for the operative words. One could say that law enforcement did its job in charging Zimmerman, that he got a fair trial, and the system worked. Cross clearly.
These kinds of state laws, Connecticut does not have one, and one could envision Zimmerman being
Okay, so the operative word is going to be have, because it's making a back reference to these kinds of state laws. Connecticut does not have one.
Connecticut does not have one.
Oh, and I also wanted to point out shootout. Yeah,
Shootout.
Yeah, that becomes like a medial T because it's got a vowel on either side of it, so it's almost a D. Goes towards it. Shootout. It makes it easier to say. Shootout. Shootout.
Shootout.
Yeah.
Shootout.
It's not really a D, but it's almost a D. It's still kind of a T going towards the D. Shootout.
Shootout.
That's it.
Connecticut does not have one, but one could envision Zimmerman being convicted of murder, or at least manslaughter.
And here is that ZH sound again, because I'll point it out to you because you're working on this. The same ZH that we're working on the other day.
Vision.
Yeah, vision. Vision.
Vision.
That's it.
Envision.
That's it.
And one could envision Zimmerman being convicted of murder, or at least what is a hoodie? Because a hoodie, it was mentioned in the previous.
A hoodie.
Is a
I guess you don't see anyone in Japan wearing these, although I'm sure some kids are. especially teenagers like to wear them, and African Americans like to wear them too. It's a sweatshirt with a hood, a little hood that you pull up over your head, and it kind of serves to disguise you a little bit and make you look, secretive. And actually, wearing a hoodie because it's a hood, And don't forget what the other meaning of the word hood is. A hood is a gangster, that hood came over and demanded his money. Yeah, because the very idea, because the very idea of a hood throughout history has been someone who's cloaking themselves, maybe hiding from the law. It's very interesting because that could have played an important part. It certainly played a part, in the profiling of Trayvon Martin. And someone who's wearing a hood just looks more suspicious. Even though it's just a fashion, it's a fashion, so much as with kids.
We see it in the. How can I link this three words? We see it in the extremes.
Yeah, a good place to look for linking. See it in the. We see it in the extremes of the vigilante. We see it in the extremes, and it's a great place to do linking because it makes the more operative word extremes really stand out. When you minimize all those short little connecting words that aren't really important. We see it in the extremes. So I'm going right to that word extremes. We see it in the extremes of the vigilante.
We see it in the extremes of the vigilante cruising pursued by. We see it in the extremes of the vigilante cruising.
Right.
Is it a compound?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Noun.
Exactly. It's as though you could put a hyphen between those two words. Vigilante cruising. That's a good way to think of it that way. Yeah.
We sit in the extremes of the vigilante cruising pursued by Zimmerman, except that there was no crime to seek justice against other than a black teenager walking down the street.
First syllable stress, teenager.
Teenager. A black teenager. Walking down the street.
Yeah, I know you don't have too many of those in Tokyo.
No, I've rarely seen one. A black teenager walking down the street, or the patrols promised by a KKK group last week in Milford, Connecticut.
KKK is Ku Klux Klan, of course.
It's a white people group.
White supremacist group. The most famous one after Adolf Hitler's, I guess. The ones who were famous for their lynchings and violence against black people for decades in the South.
Law.
Yeah, interesting. The day before.
The day before the Zimmerman verdict in the same state of Florida, under the guidelines of the same stand your ground law, Marisa Alexander was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
All right, let's start that again, all right? And again, make the irony stand out. The day before the Zimmerman verdict, in the same state of Florida, under the guidelines of the same stand your ground law.
The day before the Zimmerman verdict, the same state of Florida, under the same guidelines of the same stand your ground law, Marisa Alexander was sentenced to 30 years in prison as her 11-year-old daughter wept for firing warning shots to fend off an abusive husband. Alexander is black. She didn't have Zimmerman's team of lawyers or defense fund filled with contributions from white people.
Defense fund is one of those hyphenated words.
Defense fund.
Defense fund. So that means you've got to go down and pitch on fund. Defense fund.
Or defense fund. Or defense fund. After this case, in a few other cases, there is no progress in gun control in the U.S. It seems that they still not accept gun control is not accepted. I think they still want to have their own right to own a gun.
Not accepted. This is one of those things where you need a K sound. Accept. And it's the same thing that comes up with the word suggest, right? You need that medial G or K sound to be played as a drum beat there. Suggest, accept.
Just accept, accepted. It is not acceptable.
That's it. That's it. It sounds much better than just pronouncing it like an S. Acceptable.
Acceptable. It is not acceptable.
Yeah.
But there's no progress in gun control in the U.S. And how about massive shooting? In this case, it's not massive shooting, so it can be
mass shooting. You mean
mass shooting?
You mean like what happened a year ago in the movie theater in Colorado?
Yes.
Or the school in Connecticut, more recently.
Yes, the school kids were killed by gunmen. I think in all these cases, the killer was shot dead or arrested, but there's still no progress in gun control after these kinds of tragedies. So I think there's no concern. I think the US doesn't concern any gun control law, or they think just keep the status quo.
There's a very large constituency, I'm afraid, that is, as President Obama once said, that clings to their Bibles and their guns. Which is an interesting way to phrase it, their Bibles and their guns, because they're the same people who have these very strong, old-fashioned, traditional concepts about frontier justice and how every man, because it's such a, America, is such a recent, frontier, coming from that frontier country where every man had a gun on his hip. And that mentality carries over to a lot of people, who live especially in rural areas in the country. I know where I live is rural, and people probably have like 10 rifles hanging in their house.